130,000 years ago, in what is now Croatia, a Neanderthal died. And when archaeologists examined the grave, they found something that changed everything we thought we knew about our extinct cousins. 8 eagle talons, cut, polished, strung together with animal sinew as jewelry. By every rule of early science, Neanderthals were supposed to be mindless brutes, primitive cavemen who grunted, threw rocks, and barely stumbled out of the Stone Age. They weren't supposed to have symbolism. They weren't supposed to have art. They weren't supposed to care about looking good. But someone did this. Someone sat in a cave, carefully snipping the claws off dead eagles, some of the most dangerous birds on Earth, and turned them into an accessory. And that raises a question that nobody talks about. If Neanderthals had jewelry, what else did they have? We have a story we tell ourselves about Neanderthals, that they were inferior, that they were the losing team in the great evolutionary tournament, that survival of the fittest meant we outsmarted them, outhunted them, and drove them to extinction. The smart humans won. The dumb apes disappeared. And for a long time, that's what we believed. That they were a failed experiment, a dead-end branch on the evolutionary tree, abandoned by nature, left behind, forgotten. But the evidence keeps telling a different story, a more complicated one, a more human one, and nowhere is that story more surprising than when we look inside their heads. First, let's understand something. Neanderthals had bigger brains than us, not the same size, larger, by an average of 200 cubic centimeters. If brain size meant exactly what it sounds like, Neanderthals should have been smarter than us. But for decades, scientists argued that their brains were structured differently, that the extra space was devoted to vision and body control, leaving less room for higher thought. That was the theory. Clean, logical, convenient, and almost certainly wrong. Because the archaeological record keeps showing us something different, something that forces us to reconsider everything. Let's go back 50,000 years. A man in a cave in Iraq, known as Shanidar I. When researchers found him, his bones told a brutal story. He had suffered a massive blow to the head, shattering his eye socket. He had a withered right arm. He had deformities in his feet. He could not hunt. He could not gather. He could not defend himself. By every rule of Ice Age survival, he should have been dead. He wasn't. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone kept him alive for years. And that someone was a Neanderthal, or consider the caves of El Cedron in Spain. Researchers found the remains of a Neanderthal child with a congenital birth defect, a cleft palate that would have made eating and speaking incredibly difficult. And yet, this child lived to at least 6 years old. In the brutal Ice Age, keeping a disabled child alive required effort. It required resources. It required compassion. These aren't isolated cases. Across Europe and the Middle East, the Neanderthal record shows the same pattern. People who could not have survived alone, who did. Not because they were hidden, but because their communities made a choice. The oldest known acts of human compassion didn't start with us. They were there long before we arrived. But here's where it gets more complicated, because having a big brain and caring for your sick isn't the same as having a modern mind. A Neanderthal could survive the cold. They could hunt mammoths. They could use fire. But could they imagine things that didn't exist? Could they tell stories? For a long time, the assumption was simple. They couldn't. They lacked the cognitive revolution. They were trapped in the present, unable to think about the future or the abstract. That was the theory. And then we found the art. In 2018, researchers dated a red pigment painted on a stalagmite in a Spanish cave. It was made by Neanderthals over 65,000 years ago. long before modern humans even set foot in Europe. They painted. In Germany, they carved intricate geometric patterns into mammoth ivory. They used feathers for decoration. They used mussel shells as pigments. What we call abstract thought, what we called the spark of modern humanity. They had it. So, how did early scientists get it so wrong? The answer almost universally comes down to bias. In 1856, when the first Neanderthal skeleton was found in Germany, the scientific community had already decided that evolution was a straight line. A ladder with apes at the bottom, Neanderthals in the middle, and white Europeans at the top. They looked at the heavy brow ridges, the stocky build, and they decided it was a missing link. A primitive savage. Think about what this means. A creature with a larger brain than ours, who buried their dead, who cared for their disabled, who made jewelry and paint. In the 19th century, we put them in a cage and displayed them as ape men. In the ancient world, if they had met us, they might have thought we were the primitive ones. We were the skinny, weak newcomers from Africa. Anthropologists have noted for decades that the physical differences between us and Neanderthals were actually very small. If you put a Neanderthal in a suit and put him on a subway, he would look like a heavily built, slightly strange human. He would not look like a monster. But let's not romanticize this, because the ancient world was not gentle. Not always, not everywhere. Why are they gone? If they were so smart, if they had art, if they had compassion, why did they go extinct while we survived? The answer isn't that we were smarter. It's that we were different. Modern humans developed a specific type of intelligence. We didn't get bigger brains, we got more connected brains. We developed hypersociality. We could cooperate in massive numbers. We could believe in shared fictions, gods, nations, money. We could trade with strangers hundreds of miles away. Neanderthals lived in small, tight-knit family bands. They were perfectly adapted to a harsh, stable, frozen world. And then the climate shifted. The forests died, the ice retreated, and the landscape fragmented. Their small bands got cut off from each other. We didn't outbrute them. We didn't outthink them in a head-to-head battle. We simply had a social network that could absorb the shock of a changing world, and theirs couldn't. The tension between survival and extinction wasn't invented in the modern world. It is as old as the species themselves. And then came the final twist, because the story doesn't end with their extinction. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, and they found something that shattered the last remaining boundary between us and them. We interbred. If you are of European, Asian, or Native American descent, you carry between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. The history of humanity is not a clean arc where one species conquered and replaced another. It is a story of merging, of absorption. We still carry their immune system genes. We carry their skin genes. We carry pieces of their brains inside our own. We still use Neanderthal as an insult to mean someone stupid or backward, when the reality is they are us. But here's what the bones tell us. Here's what 130,000 years of evidence actually shows. They weren't brutes. They weren't missing links. They were people who lived, loved, suffered, and created beauty in a world that was trying to kill them. That man in the Croatian cave wearing his eagle talons. We don't know his name. We don't know what he believed. We don't know what his community thought when he strung those claws together. We just know that a piece of him is still alive, inside you, inside me. That is the oldest human instinct we have evidence for. Older than art, older than civilization. The drive to connect, to adorn, to create meaning out of a meaningless world. We came from them, all of us. We didn't just replace them. We merged with them. The question is whether we can finally